Welcome back to the Torque Test channel. This is, believe it or not, a couple $1,000s in simply hardware. Custom machined, heat treated, and coated bolts and machine parts for the purpose of, well, basically ruining all of them with tools. You see, sometimes we sit on a pile of tools just trying different methods to where we might get good repeatable data out of them. And today, finally, about a year later, we have, including brands like Wera, PBSwiss, VIM, Tekton, Wiha, GripEdge, Milwaukee, Bondus, and more. Chapters at the bottom of your screen if you want to see just a particular type. This is a hex socket cap screw. You'll also often see these as button head cap screws. I've always called them Allen bolts, but basically they do strip out a lot. At least around here, often they show up already stripped out when we see them. So what brand or type of tool is least likely to do that? Today we take a look at impact bits and impact bit sockets for internal hex. And we don't really care for our purposes today the exact type, just which ones translate the most amount of torque and do so well without stripping the head. Then pick the type that fits where you need to fit it, whether it's extra long, stubby, mid-length, in between. Choose from the best ones that are near the top that would work best for you. Problem is, these hex cap screws, when you test them to peak performance using that full depth of hex, the heads just snap off. The bolt goes before many of the better bits do, which you might think, well, then problem solved, tool better than bolt. But we're relying on threads for our test measurements. Oftentimes these bolt heads are corroded, rust in place, no longer requiring any help from those Titan threads to keep it in place. They're basically spot welded by rust, and you're fighting against the head that won't rotate. Or the last guy gave it too many ugga-duggas and now it looks like Play-Doh. Which hex bit or bit socket's going to give you the best fighting chance? So we figured weld these to larger bolts, threads that can survive and transmit data, using the same size hex head we're working with. This, though, softened, annealed the class 12.9 heads, and not even uniformly, each one a new hardness and therefore all useless and not replicable. So we submitted an order last year to have an outfit machine and broach the internal hexes into custom left-hand thread M20 bolts, so we can both use these tools in the reverse direction to max them out until they bugger things up, and large enough threads that doesn't cause them to deform and lose data. We have M6, M8, and M10 because smaller than that you lose a lot of data from that bit size to thread size difference, and only in hex for now because we can't have torque shapes broached into these yet from what we've found. We have enough bolts that will become trash for today, as well as a bunch of these outside/inside hex parts that we had made for use in Pushy, our automated wrench turning rig, for hand tools, non-impact rated stuff like Allen keys, bit sockets used by hand until stripped out. So please leave suggestions below that you'd like to see and we'll buy those for a future episode. We'll be using these for that as well. Up first in order of price today though is the Wiha at 90 cents a piece, but that's also likely because they don't go into any larger sizes, which is why we're starting with it, a baseline of simply the 6mm size. We'll use progressively more powerful tools, 1/4-inch hex impact drivers up to 3/8 drive impacts until each bit fails or rounds out the fastener. The rigid impact driver with their tabless battery on it with this bit goes to 48 foot-pounds. No real damage or rounding to speak of yet. With Milwaukee's latest highest torque impact driver, that's increased to 59 foot-pounds. Once we move on from impact drivers, we see the M12 stubby 3/8 impact, their first Gen 1, so 250 foot-pounds. We do these in forward and reverse. We cycle every tool a few times. That eventually gets to 48 before rounding out the 6mm internal hex and representing a high water mark in 6mm, at least for now. Now, with rounding like this, you might be curious about what you're looking at for bolt hardness in that hex depth. Well, we designed these to be a pretty sweet middle ground. The depth for each size of these is exactly in between a hex socket cap screw and a button head screw for each size. And the hardness of these is on the upper end of grade 5 or metric class 8.8 bolts and about at the low end of grade 8 or metric 10.9. We didn't want scenarios too perfect or too disadvantaged to where no tool does well. We want results you can compare well and also not lab perfect, deep, hard as nails, class 12.9 stuff either. These are the Milwaukee Shockwave hex bits. They're made in China and $1.10 a piece, but also go to larger sizes than you'll find most hex bit sets, and this length, 10 millimeters, which is pretty cool. The Milwaukee Shockwave design suffers in some ways due to that tapering they put in the center of the bit, even their short bits. This is for the purpose of increasing lifetime, like durability, acting like a torque stick, soaking up those impacts, limiting shock transfer, but that does limit what each respective tool can tackle, what it can put out. As a result, what you're seeing here is each tool, the same impact, same charged batteries. We go forward and reverse with each tool a set amount of time, maxing out the tool. Each is hitting lower numbers, and in this case, even stripping out the internal hex at a lower amount as well, for whatever reason. The 8mm size does do better, all said, compared, well, to the 6mm. We see 51 foot-pounds from the rigid and 58 foot-pounds from the M18 impact driver. Then the M12 stubby isn't able to make it cam out, break, or round that internal hex, but also isn't itself able to pile much more than the driver did on top of that torque figure. The M18 3/8 mid-torque, rated at 600 foot-pounds, is what's needed to take it to where it will do those things, 93 foot-pounds, at which point it snaps in half in that shockwave zone. Which is also why we won't be doing 10mm for these little insert bit portions of this video. The 1/4-inch hex into the tool becomes your limitation. Up next in order of price is quite a step, but you can't leave them out in any conversation that involves internal hex. It's PBSwiss at $3.45 a piece. While the Wiha or VIA was designed in Germany but made in Vietnam, these are both designed and made in Switzerland. They have almost like a titanium-like finish, or like when you heat treat precipitation hardness stainless, they sometimes look this color as well. Maybe they're made out of 17-4 stainless. That would be pretty cool. Let's see how they do. The PBSwiss 6mm makes 42 foot-pounds with the rigid. We cycle it back and forth many times to increase its wear, but 42 is as much as it made, and 49 foot-pounds with the M18 impact driver. The Gen 1 M12 stubby impact wrench is going to bring that up to 56, and this is, even as a 6mm, going to graduate to the 3/8 mid-torque, where it will see as much as 69 foot-pounds. Nice. In 8mm, it makes it further, but also not quite at the same time. It goes from 49 with the rigid to 60 with the M18 impact driver, then up to 70, so it's outpacing the Milwaukee 8mm. And at the 3/8 mid-torque, it's able to do about what the Shockwave bits do and just not fail there. It's maxing out the gun, so stopping progress in that way, but not able to round it out yet. So we decided the next stage should be to slap a 12 amp hour forge on the 3/8 mid-torque, and yeah, that took care of it. Now lots of debris left over to enjoy as well. So looking at where we're recording data here, it made it through more stages, as in a longer list of tool setups that will not break this bit, but in peak, 1 foot-pound away over here, if that makes sense. We're moving on to Wera. These are cool because, yeah, the whole German thing, but also they bring their own unique design to the table. Something in this space of tools is almost non-existent. Being unique, it's just usually a hex shape. Each of these bits have a contour on the flats to focus turning force, pressure on the inner points to dig into those points and prevent or delay those from traveling to the flats and rounding the shape into a circle, or at least that's the idea. Let's see how they work. The impact drivers bring it up to 51 foot-pounds after each. It's not bad. We did break the included adapter, this Wera one, trying to also use that fairly quickly. Ultimately, what it's able to climb up to is going to be 63 foot-pounds. That's not bad at all. With 8mm up next, this sort of crushes. This isn't how much you can tighten Allen bolts per se. We're testing in reverse and measuring things, but think about this as 68 foot-pounds worth of stuck you can unstick with these tools. And using more powerful tools to unstick 73 and a full highest yet 102 foot-pounds worth of rusted or corroded if something's already mangled. We're showing the order of bits that give you the best shot.
That will get you.
The contour design seems to be having more advantage here the larger the bit is, which makes sense as it allows the surface area to make that design more pronounced. This is what that's going to look all like. When you rank each by how they did with each tool, like if you had one of these tools, how much you could accomplish, as well as ranking the max each one could hit, and how many stages they passed, or basically the total amount of impacting abuse they received before causing stuff to fail. For the 1/4 inch small insert hex bits, that looks like this, with PBSwiss on top, just barely over the Wera, 1.5 ranking over 1.67, a combination of a higher 6mm torque and that 6mm making it through more impacting tools, and the 8mm seeing more stages of impacting as well. Then Milwaukee, then Wiha, though it only had the 6mm size with some gap between these two. We've tested some standard short bits. Let's do some extra long. This is Wera, which is the brand I've been using simply by process of elimination over the last year or so, using several bits of this size that have sucked. Basically, what's left after 4 or 5 years of doing that, using different sets, using long bits from Wera. And these are about $20 a set, or $2.40 a piece. On the other end of the spectrum, we have VIM at $67 or $4.19 a bit. A brand we want to buy for their shorter bits as well when testing hand tools, as VIM is known for their bits. But in this category, extra long, they're either not well made and slip, or maybe they are made well enough that they simply don't translate enough torque down this whole length to do a lot of damage. Let's take a look at that. Wera, or the Wera, it goes in 6mm from 30 foot-pounds with the rigid to 36 with the M18 driver. This is multiple cycles each tool again. They drop down with the M12 stubby impact. Longer extensions prefer higher IPM to wind them up, all things being equal. This increased finally with the 3/8 mid torque to 44 foot-pounds and 45 foot-pounds when attaching the 12 amp hour forge for hopefully some more sauce. But not really seeing any much extra here. It stalled out just as a result of length, not enough torque transmitted down that length to strip anything out. The VIM does similarly. Both S2 tool steel, or at least that's what they're advertised to be, but I'm willing to believe Wera because they haven't been total trash in my experience. The VIM set goes from 28 to 35, down to 33, a dip again, as expected, lower impacts per minute, then 39 and 44 foot-pounds, as much as it's ever really going to make. These are good for both access and not accidentally stripping out fasteners as quick. Depends on your head size, I suppose. The 8mm size follows similar suit with a little more gap towards the end, and Wera in front with 68 over what's going to be 61 at the peak for VIM. When it comes to this length, which we do find useful above a certain level, they seem fairly interchangeable due to the experiencing less torque. But the VIM set, for example, does come with 3-inch lengths that we'll call like mid-length class of bits, and those make 51 foot-pounds and 95 foot-pounds, which gives you a plan B should you need more sauce. Now, is that good? I think it is, but we're gonna have to check it out. Let's find out with shortish sort of mid-length bit sockets. All 3/8 drive now, so we're stepping up into the big leagues and leaving impact drivers behind. Starting with the Neiko, because it's sort of an introductory price of $30, but also made in Taiwan, which for impact grade stuff is usually a good bet. The fit on these feels solid, which is a good thing. With no additional adapter or linkage between the tool and the hex, this type of bit socket should be receiving all the beans from these tools. With the 3/8 Gen 1 stubby, it's only able to muster 46 foot-pounds, and the 3/8 mid torque is able to take it up to 52 before stripping out the internal hex. Not really improved so far over the bit inserts. This isn't so much on the tools though, as we watch its 8mm size. If you've tried to remove an axle bolt that's large internal hex, you'll understand why we search for ever more powerful impact wrenches on this channel. Even a Gen 3 M18 high torque can stall out on a stuck internal hex bolt. Extensions, swivels, lots of scenarios where tools take away your very high starting torque figure and translate that into a fraction of your starting number. Case in point, to make more than 108, we had to employ the help of this hyper tough 1/2-inch high torque with the reducer. Chose this because it is a powerful high torque and it has a soft ramp up in power. Don't want to shock these bolts into submission. Using this, understandably, we do see a fairly big increase from this 8mm over the small insert bits, 142 foot-pounds, and then it's drilling into the bolt head, freely spinning around. The 10mm size, like the 8mm, is going to require the same sort of action from a 1/2" tool once it gets up there in torque. Not that you'd need a 1/2" impact to ruin your day with one of these. Maybe it's a button head cap screw with less depth than what we're using here. Maybe it looks less freshly machined than ours do that we need for a good test. Could be corroded, could be buggered. We're just trying to find what will afford you the best luck, and in this case, that's going to require the assistance of an 8 Ah clutch battery to get the most out of this 1/2" Hyper Tough, which will increase things from 178 up to 201 foot-pounds, which will be the number to beat for the rest of the bit sockets today, including up next, Tekton, also made in Taiwan. This set is more expensive on the whole at $50, but also comes with many more bits, 13, so the per piece cost is actually a little less, $3.85. These don't look like impact bit sockets to me. Passed them up multiple times before noticing impact in the name because they look like normal bit sockets you'd drive with a ratchet, at least on the top. That's because these are S2 material and hard as nails too. That usually goes with it. Here's how they get on. This one gets up there in a hurry to apply that torque and then rips things up. Even with just the M12 stubby. Same tool, but it chewed up some material and that material curled into the hole and pushed the bit up. You could feel it happen. It both made more torque by 1 foot-pound over the last set, but without taking as many impacting tools before getting to it. Let's see if that was a fluke. The 8mm size also makes more at this stage, not mountains more, but also doesn't round out the hex yet either. We do change the batteries between runs for each one of these. The 3/8 mid torque gets a couple cycles in, but also pushes this material out of the way like nothing we've seen yet, making like walls or ridges around the points. And that's about as far as it got, 100 foot-pounds. I think being rock hard, S2 nearly 10 points harder than the chromoly Neikos here, can be at times a bit more suited for hand tool use. The bits still look perfect though, which is a plus, but also more capable of chewing things up earlier in the process if you're not careful. That should theoretically improve with size though, not get worse with 10mm. More surface area to play with, like this M10 hex. This almost through the tool range makes more sauce per tool used. Probably also thanks to that hardness, it's able to do more at each stage and also is large enough, I'm assuming here, to have enough meat to push around and not round out and benefit from that, requiring the 8 Ah clutch pack on this Hyper Tough, which immediately gets those results we're looking for to the tune of 215 foot-pounds. Good stuff with that sort of number. Okay. And up next we have Bondus. Made in USA, these are slightly more expensive, but also come with sizes up to 17mm, way higher than any of the other 3/8 sets come with, so it's actually comparably sort of cheap per size. They're able to sort of do that by not coming with sockets. You put your own sockets on these, making them less expensive than they would be otherwise, and also you can make them 1/4, 3/8, or 1/2" drive yourself. They have these little round polymer dots that stick out and you hammer them into a socket and then they stay pretty nicely put. It would be a little annoying if you go to remove your socket and the hex bit stays in the bolt head, but also not super easy to take back out of that socket. You're sort of sacrificing a socket that you own here unless you want to use 2 pliers and pull these apart each time. The Bondus, probably as a result of being a 2-piece thing here, rather than one entity, doesn't transmit as much torque per step, as in per each tool used. As a result, you can use more types of tools and higher performance batteries with this socket before bad things happen. And in 6mm, that's 55 foot-pounds, pretty good, and the best so far. An 8mm, similar story in that when others are getting into the 80s here, we're stalling out at 63, and the mid torque is able to get to, instead of 100 or 108, bring things up to just 90 foot-pounds. The 12 Ah on this impact brings things up to 93. It's going to take a high torque to quickly punch its ticket at 98 foot-pounds, more impacting abuse taken total and more tools needed to hit that, but also similar peak figures as the others. The 10mm though, that's going to go the distance. It's basically a 10mm impact socket head-to-head against a 10mm internal hex, with the bit you purchased in between, translating all that stuff, not wanting to give up. It's an odd feeling. There's a little bit of a jiggle and shake, and the tools, when you get out there on the upper end of torque, just sort of vibrate around violently when stalled out in torque. This is sort of the thing you get on a vehicle when you're up against an internal hex axle bolt or bed bolt, something big and stuck like that. High torques only doing 200 foot-pounds worth of work here, so much so that this required breaking out a Gen 3 M18 high torque with a forge pack to make things happen, which, yeah, this does the trick. Saw as much as 208 foot-pounds along the way with it, 208, and the most number of stages out of the bunch as well. On to GripEdge. We've been wanting to try these for a long time, or we've been wanting to test them and get some numbers out of them, because I've used Mac RBRT stuff in the past and it sort of just works oddly. And these are the same folks behind that and other tool truck versions of the similar rounding prevention sets you may have seen. This stuff is far from cheap. This small set, for instance, is 120, 125 bucks. It's less than tool truck options of the same thing maybe, but still $16.43 a piece. Well, it'd better work. The design says it grabs the material and pulls it in rather than shoves it out. It has direction-like ridges that fit into the hex corners. They say these work on damaged or rounded internal hex, but also just to use them as your daily for more turning power to have on hand against any Allen bolts like this. Here at the 6mm size, because it's so aggressive, it piles on that torque quickly, even with smaller tools like this M12. It's not unidirectional, but you'll have a harder time tightening than loosening with the same amount of power, and the M12 stubby is able to strip it out at 59 foot-pounds. 8mm is where it really starts to come into its own here. M12 stubby is able to rack up a whole 104 foot-pounds, providing more grip and turning action than most of the other sets hit with 10mm bits on this tool. And from here, with the mid-torque, it's able to, after a few back and forth hits, make 144, which is above what any of the other sets did, with the same impact again on the larger 10mm size. So we're getting more bite here with an 8mm so far than a standard 10mm bit socket would with the same tool. That's increased to 151 with the larger battery. At this point, it's looking a bit more like a clover hex leaf than hex. And this is also the point, at least this next step, where a high torque does it in right away to 152 foot-pounds. The 10mm size hits 134, 171, then 186, then 230 with the Hyper Tough, and then 232. It will go in the forward direction with this design too, just it's much more potent in reverse. Then with the aid of the M18 high torque, it's going to see 269 foot-pounds. Really carved itself out a little swimming pool here. Much more meat worked against than, for example, what this 10mm Tekton takes up and can turn with. All right, this has been a long one. Sorry for that. This has been months of work and hours worth of footage. Each tool ranked here for how many stages of total impacting it took to ruin things, how much it made in peak for each one of those stages. For example, maybe you only own an M12. How much turny action are you going to get with this set or this set? And the ultimate peak numbers they hit, of course, being a big factor as well. That all works out for a ranking of 1.2 for the GripEdge, 2.5 for Neiko, 2.6 for Tekton, and 2.9 for Bondus. Both of these work well. The Tekton is lower per piece in price and doesn't skip any sizes, which is nice. And the Neiko is a lower cost as a full set and a bit easier to use. You don't have to be as trigger shy. You just kind of let it rip. The Tekton set is basically a hand tool set with this sort of design and hardness as well. So this does cover both types if you only want one. And then GripEdge. Yeah, I mean, I guess the hype is real. Scored a first place in practically every cell here. What's sort of appealing about these is you could own a set like this and just daily drive them, or you could own an impact bit socket set like these that eventually makes something like this happen around an 8mm hole. Maybe the last guy did it, and then ship a set of GripEdge overnight and get further, as in after that thing already ground this into bits, a further 40 foot-pounds on a transmission drain plug that looked like a circle drive after the last tool saw it. Or the last guy should have been using some PBSwiss bits and used Milwaukee bits instead to try to remove some bumper panel hardware, and now it doesn't come off for you anymore. But with these, you have an additional plus 13 foot-pounds to throw at it over the last decent bits before getting that welding torch. I'm assuming these work in their Torx design as well. If we find a way to get that machined into bolt heads, we surely will. We make episodes every Friday. Consider subscribing if that sounds like a cool thing to you. Thanks for watching.